Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The GPS said 17 minutes, but the locals at the gas station went quiet when I mentioned Miner's Gulch. The old man behind the counter, his weathered hands stopped counting change. The woman buying lottery tickets turned away from the scratch-offs. Even the teenager mopping the floor paused mid-swipe. "Take the highway," the old man finally said, sliding my change across the counter. "Might take you 45 minutes instead, but you'll get there." I should have listened, but you know how it is when you're running late for a job interview, especially one that could change everything. Senior park ranger at Yosemite, dream job. And I was already cutting it close after my car broke down outside Sacramento. 17 minutes versus 45, I said, pocketing my Red Bull and beef jerky. "I'll take my chances with the shortcut." The old man's jaw tightened. "Son, nobody from around here uses that road after dark." I glanced at my phone. 4:47 p.m. Plenty of daylight left in late October. "I'll be fine," I said, already heading for the door. Behind me, I heard the woman mutter something to the clerk. The only word I caught was "another one." And now, the story begins. The turnoff to Miner's Gulch appeared exactly where the GPS promised. A narrow dirt road cutting between two massive pine trees. A faded wooden sign hung crooked on one trunk. Miner's Gulch, 11 miles to Highway 49. I turned my Honda Civic onto the path, immediately feeling the change from smooth asphalt to packed earth. The trees pressed in close, their branches forming a tunnel overhead that filtered the afternoon sunlight into dancing patterns. Beautiful, actually. I couldn't understand why the locals avoided it. The first few miles were pleasant enough. My phone showed I was making good time, already shaving minutes off the longer route. The forest was quiet except for my tires crunching on gravel and the occasional bird call. I even rolled down my window to breathe in that sharp pine scent. That's when I noticed the memorials. Small wooden crosses dotted the roadside, some old and weathered, others disturbingly new. Fresh flowers at one, a teddy bear at another, its fur matted from recent rain. I counted 7 in the first mile alone. Accident-prone road, I figured. Probably why locals avoided it. City drivers taking the curves too fast, wildlife jumping out, made sense. The road began to descend, winding down into what must have been the actual gulch. The trees grew denser, their trunks pressing closer to the narrow path. My phone's signal flickered between 1 bar and none. A flash of movement in my peripheral vision made me tap the brakes. A deer? But when I looked, nothing. Just shadows between the trees. I kept driving, but slower now. Something felt off about the proportions here. The trees seemed too tall, their trunks too thick, like driving through a place built for something larger than humans. Another memorial. This one had a date from just 3 weeks ago. The sun was getting lower, painting everything in that golden hour light that photographers love, but down here in the gulch, it just made the shadows deeper, darker. My GPS recalculated. In 800 feet, continue straight. Continue straight where? The road curved ahead, following the gulch's natural contours. There was no straight path. Recalculating. Great. Lost signal completely now. But how hard could it be? 1 road in, 1 road out. Just keep driving until you hit Highway 49. The engine coughed. No, not now. I pressed the gas pedal. The car lurched forward, then smoothed out. Just a hiccup. Had to be. Another memorial. A cluster of them, actually. 5 crosses planted together like a tiny cemetery. Different dates spanning 40 years, but all in October. The gulch was deeper now. The walls rose on either side. Layers of rock showing where miners had carved into the earth over a century ago. Abandoned equipment rusted in the undergrowth. Old cart tracks disappearing into cave mouths that gaped like hungry mouths. The engine coughed again. longer this time. I checked the gauge, half a tank, more than enough, but the car was definitely struggling. Like the air was too thick down here, too heavy, movement again. This time on the road ahead. I stopped completely, peering through the windshield. About 50 feet away, something crossed the path. Low to the ground, but wrong somehow. The proportions were off. Too long in the limbs, too fluid in its movement. A mountain lion? Had to be. They were common in these parts. But mountain lions don't usually travel in groups. 3 more shapes slipped across the road, each moving with that same unsettling grace. They disappeared into the brush without a sound. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The smart thing would be to wait, let them clear the area. But the sun was dropping fast and I did not want to be here after dark. I inched forward, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. The road leveled out at the bottom of the gulch. Here, the mining operation had been more extensive. Tunnel openings dotted the cliff faces. Some boarded up, others yawning open. Rusted machinery littered the ground like mechanical skeletons. A sign caught my headlights. Miners' Gulch, site of the 1889 disaster. 47 souls lost. Disaster? I'd never heard of any mining disaster here. Then again, California had so many gold rush tragedies they probably blurred together. The engine died, just stopped. No warning, no gradual decline. One moment running, the next moment silence. I turned the key. Nothing, not even a click. Battery was fine. I'd just replaced it last month. The radio still worked, though all I got was static. I popped the hood, though I didn't know what I was looking for. Everything seemed connected. No obvious problems. But I'm no mechanic. The silence pressed in. That's what got me first. The complete absence of sound. No birds, no insects, even the wind had died. Then I heard it. Tap, 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 metal on stone. Rhythmic, deliberate, like a pickaxe. But who would be mining out here now? Tap, 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 getting closer. I slammed the hood and got back in the car, locked the doors, tried the ignition again, nothing. The tapping stopped. In the rearview mirror, I saw them. Shapes emerged from the mine entrances. Human in form, but wrong in every detail. They moved like footage played at the wrong speed. Too quick, then too slow. Their clothes hung in tatters, styles from different eras. Some wore the rough canvas of 1800s miners. Others had polyester from the 70s. Modern hiking gear on a few, but their faces... I couldn't look directly at their faces. My brain wouldn't process what I was seeing, like trying to focus on something in your peripheral vision. The details slipped away the moment I tried to grasp them. They surrounded the car, not threatening, just watching. Waiting. One approached my window. This close, I could see the pickaxe in his hand. The tool worn smooth from use. His miner's helmet still had a carbide lamp attached, though no flame burned in it. He tapped on the glass. Not aggressive, almost polite. Tap, 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 the same rhythm I'd heard before. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead. Some instinct told me not to look directly at him. Not to meet whatever passed for eyes in that blurred space where his face should be. More joined him. They pressed against the windows, not trying to break in, just observing, like I was an exhibit in a zoo. One of them pointed at my phone on the dashboard, then at the forest. A gesture I somehow understood. No signal down here. No calling for help. My throat was desert dry. The Red Bull in the cup holder seemed like a stupid thing to focus on, but I needed something normal to anchor myself. I reached for it slowly. The figures tensed. When I cracked it open, they relaxed. A few even mimicked the motion, raising invisible cans to their obscured faces. Were they copying me? One of the figures in modern clothes. A woman in what looked like running gear moved to the front of the car. She pointed at the hood, then made a turning motion with her hand. "Try the engine again?" I turned the key. The engine roared to life. The figures stepped back immediately, melting away from the car like shadows from a sudden light. Within seconds, they were gone. Disappeared back into the mines or the forest or wherever they came from. I didn't question it. I put the car in drive and pressed the gas. The road continued through the gulch, past more mines, more equipment, more memorials. But I didn't see any more figures. Maybe they'd had their fun. Maybe they just wanted to look. Or maybe they were saving something special for later. The road began to climb, winding up the far side of the gulch. My phone showed 0 bars still, but at least the engine was running. The gas gauge hadn't moved, still at half a tank despite the miles I'd driven. How many miles had I driven? The odometer showed I'd come 15 miles since the gas station, but the sign had said 11 miles to Highway 49. I should have reached it by now. The sun touched the horizon, painting everything blood orange. In maybe 20 minutes it would be full dark. Another memorial, fresh flowers again. The date was today? No. I misread it. Had to have misread it. I didn't stop to check. The road leveled out at the top of the climb. Through the trees, I could see the gulch spread out below. A wound in the earth filled with shadows. Somewhere down there, those things were probably still watching. A new sign. Leaving Miners Gulch, Highway 49, 11 miles. 11 miles? But I'd already driven 15. How was I back at the same distance? The road curved ahead, looking exactly like the entrance I'd taken. The same 2 pine trees. The same crooked sign. I was back at the beginning. No, that was impossible. I'd driven straight through, no turns, no forks in the road, just one path from entrance to exit. But there was my tire marks in the dirt, heading into the gulch. I checked my phone. 5:23 p.m. I'd been driving for over half an hour. The math didn't work. 11 miles at even a careful 20 miles per hour should have taken, 35 minutes at most? The gas gauge still showed half a tank, exactly half, like I hadn't burned any fuel at all. I had 2 options. Turn around, go back to the gas station, take the long way, show up late to the interview or maybe miss it entirely, or try again. Maybe I'd missed a turn somehow. Maybe there was a fork in the road I hadn't noticed in my nervousness. The sun was lower now. Maybe 15 minutes of good light left. I turned back into Miners Gulch. This time, I paid attention to every detail, counted every memorial, watched for any side roads. There were none. Just the one path winding down into the earth. The figures appeared earlier this time. I saw them in the trees before I even reached the bottom, keeping pace with the car, not hiding anymore, just following. The engine didn't die this time. They didn't approach. They just watched from a distance as I drove through their domain. I reached the climb out, passed the same equipment, the same signs, crested the hill, leaving Miners Gulch, Highway 49, 11 miles. Back at the start, again. The sun was touching the mountains now. 5 minutes until dark. Maybe less. I pulled over, hands shaking as I killed the engine. I needed to think. There had to be an explanation. A logical reason why I kept ending up back here. Maybe the road did loop somehow. Maybe it was designed that way. An old mining road that circled back for the carts. But that didn't explain the signs, or why the locals avoided it, or why those things were down there. I looked at the gas gauge, still exactly half full. My phone showed 5:41 p.m., but that was wrong. I checked it at 5:23 and I'd been driving for at least another 30 minutes. Time wasn't working right here. A tap on my window made me jump. One of them stood beside my car. This one wore a park ranger uniform. My blood went cold. The uniform was modern, fresh. The name tag was too blurred to read, but I could make out the Yosemite National Park badge. He pointed at my back seat, where my own ranger application packet sat. Then at himself, then at the gulch. The message was clear. I could join them. I started the car and floored it. This time, I didn't stop at the entrance. I kept going. Past the wooden sign, past the pine trees, back toward the gas station. Or tried to. The road curved impossibly. But trees I didn't remember appeared in my path. The pavement that should have been there was gone, replaced by more dirt road. I was heading back into the gulch, without ever turning around. The figures lined the road now, dozens of them, all watching my futile attempt to escape. The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Darkness fell like a curtain. My headlights carved a tunnel through the black, but it was a losing battle. The darkness here wasn't just absence of light. It was a presence, a weight. It pressed against the windows and slipped through the vents. The figures were clearer in the dark, as if sunlight had been what blurred them. I could see their faces now. I wished I couldn't. They weren't decomposed, weren't skeletal, weren't any of the things you'd expect from people who'd been dead for decades. They were just empty. Like someone had taken an eraser to their features, not missing, just smudged out of existence. Eyes that were suggestions of eyes. Mouths that were implications of mouths. But somehow that was worse than any horror movie monster. They walked alongside the car now, keeping pace easily even though I was doing 30 miles per hour. The speedometer said 30, but the trees crawled by like I was barely moving. More joined from the mines, from the forest, from nowhere. A parade of the lost, all following my car down into the gulch. The radio crackled. Through the static I heard voices. Search and rescue teams have found no trace of the missing hiker. Park officials are asking. Third disappearance this month along the old mining road. Local residents continue to warn, if you're receiving this broadcast, do not stop your vehicle. Do not exit your vehicle. Do not look directly at. The voices cut out, replaced by something else. Tap, 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 that rhythmic sound of pickaxe on stone, coming through my speakers. The engine coughed. No, not again, not in the dark with them all around. But it kept running, barely. I reached the bottom of the gulch. The mines gaped like mouths in my headlights. And from each one, more figures emerged. Hundreds now. All walking in the same direction. All following my car. Where were they leading me? The road split. I slammed the brakes. There had never been a split before. Just one road, entrance to exit. But now a second path branched off. Newer looking, with fresh gravel. A figure stepped in front of my car, the park ranger. He pointed down the new path, insistent, urgent even. The other figures had stopped. They watched, waiting to see what I would choose. I looked down the new road. My headlights showed it climbing up, heading in what might be the right direction, toward Highway 49, or toward something else. The ranger stepped aside. The choice was mine. Behind me, the road I'd come from was gone, just forest now, dense and impenetrable. I turned onto the new path. The figures didn't follow. They stood at the intersection, watching until my taillights disappeared around the bend. The new road climbed steeply. My engine strained but kept running. The darkness seemed less oppressive here, more normal. Just regular night instead of that hungry black. My phone buzzed. 1 bar of signal, then 2, then full bars as I crested the hill. Signs of civilization appeared. A real road sign. Highway 49, 2 miles. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Partly relief, partly hysteria. The road smoothed out, dirt giving way to worn asphalt. Streetlights appeared in the distance. Beautiful, artificial, normal streetlights. I hit Highway 49 doing 60. Turned north toward the interview I'd definitely missed. I didn't care. I was out. I was free. I'd driven for 2 hours, but my clock showed only 6:13 p.m. The gas gauge still read exactly half full. I pulled into the first gas station I saw. Bright lights, normal people, civilization. The attendant was a young guy, maybe 19. He looked at my car strangely as I filled up. "Rough night?" he asked. "You could say that. Hey, you know anything about Miners Gulch?" His face went pale. Did you take that road?" I nodded. He looked at me closer, then took a step back. "Your eyes," he said quietly. "What about them?" He grabbed his phone, turned on the camera, flipped it to selfie mode, handed it to me. My face looked normal, tired, stressed, but normal. Except my eyes. In my eyes, I could see them. The figures. Still there. Still watching. Like looking through a window into that dark gulch. They waved. The kid backed away. "You need to leave. Now." Before what? But I already knew. I could feel it. The pull. The need to go back. To take that turnoff again. To drive down into the gulch where they were waiting. Where I belonged now. I paid for my gas and left. Drove north on Highway 49. Made it to my interview, actually. Got the job, too. Senior park ranger. Dream come true. But every night I feel it. The pull. The need to drive. To find that unmarked turnoff. To go back. And every night the pull gets stronger. I've started seeing them during the day now. In mirrors. In windows. In the eyes of other people who look at me too long. They're patient. They know I'll come back. Everyone does, eventually. That's why locals never use the shortcut through Miners Gulch. Because once you do, you never really leave. So, I have to ask, have you ever noticed an old dirt road on your commute? One you've always been curious about but never taken? Maybe your GPS suggests it sometimes. Says it'll save you time. Take my advice. Don't. Some shortcuts cost more than time. Some roads don't want to let you go, and some places, some places are patient. They can wait. They've got all the time in the world, because time works differently in places like Miners Gulch. And once you notice that, once you really understand what that means, it's already too late. Sweet dreams. Wait, before you go, before you close this video and move on with your night, I need to tell you the rest. The part I've been avoiding. See, I did go back. Of course I did. You knew I would, didn't you? The pull was too strong. Like an itch in the back of my brain that no amount of scratching could reach. It was 3 months after I started the ranger job. 3 months of seeing them in every reflection. 3 months of dreams filled with tap, tap, tap. I told myself I was going to investigate. Professional curiosity, document the area for the Park Service. Maybe there was a geological explanation. Magnetic fields or gas pockets that caused hallucinations. I prepared this time. Full tank of gas. Extra batteries. GPS tracker. Even a GoPro to record everything. I'd prove what happened, get evidence, maybe help others who'd been trapped. But you can't prepare for a place that doesn't follow rules. I found the turnoff easily. Too easily. Like it had been waiting for me. Moved closer to the main road just to make sure I wouldn't miss it. The wooden sign looked newer. Freshly painted. Miners Gulch, 11 miles to Highway 49. Welcome back. Those last 2 words hadn't been there before. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. Engine running, hands on the wheel. I could still leave, turn around, never come back. Then I saw her. A jogger on the main road. Young woman, maybe mid-20s. She slowed near the turnoff, checked her phone. Looked down the dirt road like she was considering it. No, I jumped out of my car. "Hey, don't take that road!" She startled, hand going to the pepper spray on her belt. "Excuse me?" "The shortcut. Through Miners Gulch. Don't take it, trust me." She looked at me, and I saw her eyes widen. She was seeing them, wasn't she? seeing the figures reflected in my eyes. "What? What's wrong with your... Please, just take the highway. It's longer, but you'll get where you're going." She backed away from me. Probably thought I was unstable, dangerous maybe, but she kept backing toward the main road, away from the turnoff. Okay, highway it is." She turned and ran. Actually ran. Good. One saved at least. But saving her had cost me. The pull was stronger now, undeniable. Like I'd made a bargain. Her freedom for my return. I got back in my car and turned onto the dirt road. Everything was different in daylight. Welcoming, almost. The trees seemed to part respectfully. Birds sang. Actual birds, this time. Not the silence I remembered. The memorials were still there, but they looked maintained. Fresh paint on the crosses. New flowers that couldn't have been more than a day old. Names and dates clearly visible. I stopped at one. Jennifer Martinez, October 15th, 2018. She just wanted to save time. Another. Robert Chen, October 22nd, 1994. The interview could have waited. And another. David Kim, October 30th, 2024. He thought he could document the truth. That date, 2024, last year, but the name... I looked closer. The photo attached to the memorial. It was grainy, black and white like an old newspaper clipping. It was me. My throat went dry. I was looking at my own memorial, my own death date from a year ago. But I was alive. I was here. I'd escaped that night and lived a full year since then, hadn't I? I thought back. The months since that night, they were foggy, dreamlike. I remembered getting the job, starting work. But the details. What was my supervisor's name? Where exactly did I live? What had I done yesterday? The memories were there, but thin. Like props in a play, just enough to maintain the illusion. I got back in the car, continued down into the gulch. They were waiting for me. All of them. Hundreds lining the road like a welcome party. The park ranger stood at the front. This time I stopped. Got out. Faced them. "Am I dead?" My voice cracked on the words. The ranger tilted his head. When he spoke, his voice was like wind through mine shafts. "Dead is complicated here. How long have I been here? Really been here? Time is complicated too." He gestured at the gulch. "This place, it collects. Not just people, moments, possibilities. You're here. You're also on Highway 49 a year ago, crashed into a tree, neck broken. You're also in your apartment, sleeping, dreaming this. You're also... Stop." I couldn't process it, didn't want to. "The gulch needs witnesses," he continued. "People to remember, to warn others, to send them back out into the world with just enough fear to spread the stories. But some don't get to leave. Some don't want to." He looked at the others. "Some find it peaceful here, no more rush. No more worry about being late. Time means nothing when you have all of it and none of it at once." I thought about the past year, the job I'd apparently been doing, the life I'd been living. Had any of it been real, or just another loop? A longer one that took a year to complete. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did I get to leave when others didn't? Did you leave?" He gestured at my memorial. "Or are you still driving? Still looping? Still trying to find your way out?" My GoPro was recording all of this. Evidence, finally. Proof of what this place was. I looked at the screen. Static. Just static and that sound. Tap, tap, tap. "Technology doesn't work right here," the ranger said. "Neither does time. Or death, or escape. So, what am I supposed to do? Just accept it? Join you?" "You already have." He pointed behind me. I turned. My car was gone. In its place stood another figure. Newer looking than the others. It wore my clothes, had my build, but the face was already beginning to blur. "That's not me," I said. But even as I said it, I felt myself getting lighter, less solid, like I was spreading out, becoming part of the gulch itself. Everyone thinks they're different, the ranger said sadly. Everyone thinks they found the way out. But there is no out, there's just the loop. Small ones, big ones, some that last minutes, some that last years. I ran, stupid probably. Where was there to run in a gulch that folded in on itself? But I ran anyway, through the trees, past the mines, looking for something, anything. I found it at the old mining office, a building I hadn't noticed before. Inside, records, logbooks, newspaper clippings. Mining disaster of 1889, 47 dead in collapse. But the dates were wrong. All wrong. The disaster happened in 1889, and 1923, and 1967, and 1995, and 2019. Always 47 dead. Always in October. Always the same story, just with different names, different years. The gulch had been collecting for over a century. I heard footsteps. The ranger appeared in the doorway. "Now you understand," he said. "It's not about escape, it's about acceptance. Some of us drive the loop forever. Some of us warn the newcomers. Some of us maintain the memorials. We all have our roles. What's mine?" He smiled, or what passed for a smile on that blurred face. "You tell the stories. You go back out. For a while, live your loop. Warn who you can. Save who you can. And eventually I come back. Everyone does." He was right. I could feel it settling into my bones. The truth of it, I was part of Miner's Gulch now. Had been since that first drive-through. Everything else was just the longer loop, the illusion of escape. But maybe that was okay. Maybe warning others was enough. Maybe saving that jogger meant something. Maybe... I blinked. I was in my car, on Highway 49, driving home from work. My phone showed October 29th, 2025. Almost a year exactly since I'd first driven through. Tomorrow was the 30th, my death day, according to the memorial, or my return day. I could feel them watching. In every reflection, in every shadow, waiting, the turnoff would appear tomorrow. I was certain of it. Move itself right onto my regular commute, make itself unavoidable. And I would take it, because that's what I do, what I've always done, what I will always do. The loop completes. The gulch collects. The stories spread. And somewhere out there, you're listening. Thinking about that weird road you've always wondered about. That shortcut that could save you time. Don't. But you will, eventually. When the time is right, when the gulch is hungry. Because that's how it works. That's how it's always worked. I'll see you there. In the place where time breaks and loops fold in on themselves. Where October lasts forever and escape is just another kind of trap. We'll be waiting. We're always waiting, in Miner's Gulch. Sweet dreams, if you can still have them. And hey, if this story kept you up, if it made you think twice about that shortcut tomorrow, hit subscribe, share it, save someone else. The Gulch is patient, but maybe we can make it wait a little longer. Maybe. Story number 2. They say patterns are everywhere if you know how to look. But sometimes you find things that were never meant to be found. And once you see them, they see you too. Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at the patterns around you? The wallpaper in your bedroom? The tiles on your bathroom floor? Or maybe the carpet beneath your feet right now? Take a moment. Look down. Do you see it? Those swirling designs, those repeating shapes? What if I told you they might be trying to tell you something? Hit that subscribe button if you're brave enough to find out what happens when patterns become messages, and messages become warnings. And remember, some things can't be unseen. Now, let's begin our story. The smell hit me first. That distinct cocktail of mothballs, old paper, and something else I couldn't quite place. Sweet, but wrong somehow. Like flowers left too long in a vase. "Everything must go," the woman at the door said, her voice flat and tired. She had the look of someone who'd been sorting through a dead relative's belongings for too long. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy bun. Cash only, no returns. I nodded, stepping into the Victorian house on Maple Street. I'd driven past it 100 times growing up in Burlington, Vermont. The Whitmore place, everyone knew it, but nobody really knew the family. They kept to themselves mostly. Old money, old house, old secrets. The estate sale had been advertised in the local paper for weeks. Antiques, furniture, rugs, and curiosities from the historic Whitmore collection. I was furnishing my first apartment. Needed everything on a teacher's salary. Estate sales were gold mines for people like me. The living room was packed with shoppers, all pawing through boxes and examining furniture. I squeezed past a couple arguing over a grandfather clock, made my way toward the back of the house. That's where the good stuff usually hid, the things other people overlooked. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Victorian houses did that sometimes, played tricks with perspective. The floorboards creaked under my feet, each step echoing despite the carpet runner. Persian, I thought, or maybe Turkish. The pattern was intricate, almost hypnotic, geometric shapes folding in on themselves, creating new patterns within patterns. I found myself slowing down, watching the design shift under my feet. Strange how it seemed to move, not literally, of course, just that optical illusion thing where patterns seem to breathe if you stare long enough. But this felt different. The shapes weren't just repeating, they were progressing, like reading a sentence but in symbols instead of words. "You interested in the rugs?" I jumped. The woman from the door stood behind me, closer than was comfortable. Up close, I could see her eyes were red-rimmed. Crying or lack of sleep, maybe both. Maybe, I said. Just browsing. She studied me for a long moment. My aunt collected them. Spent her whole life studying carpet patterns. Said they were like books, if you knew how to read them. A bitter laugh. Course, she said a lot of things toward the end. "I'm sorry for your loss." She waved it off. Patricia hadn't been herself for years. The dementia took her mind long before her body gave out. She gestured at the runner. "This one's not for sale, but there's a whole room of them upstairs. Third door on the left. Some are quite valuable, if you know what to look for." She drifted away, leaving me alone in the hallway. I looked down at the runner again. The pattern did seem oddly deliberate, not random at all. The shapes flowed from one to the next with purpose, intention. I headed upstairs. The third door on the left was already open. Inside, rolled carpets leaned against every wall. Some were wrapped in plastic, others exposed, their edges fraying with age. The room smelled of wool and dust and that same sweet wrong scent from downstairs. Most were too big for my apartment. Too expensive, too, probably. But in the corner, partially hidden behind a larger roll, I spotted something different. Smaller, maybe 4 by 6 feet. The colors were muted. Faded browns and creams and rust reds. But the pattern... I pulled it free, unrolled it carefully on the floor. The design was unlike anything I'd seen. Not quite geometric, not quite organic. The shapes seemed to shift between abstract and almost recognizable. Like looking at clouds and seeing faces, but more deliberate, more intentional, and in the center, barely visible unless you looked just right. There was something that might have been text, not English, not any language I recognized, but definitely symbols arranged with meaning. A message woven into wool and time. "How much for this one?" The woman appeared in the doorway so suddenly I wondered if she'd been watching. "That one." She frowned. "I don't remember seeing it before, must have been in the attic." She came closer, studied the pattern. Her frown deepened. Aunt Patricia always said, "No, never mind." "Said what?" She shook her head. "Just old woman nonsense." She claimed some carpets were active. That's the word she used. Active. Said they communicated with sensitive people. Another bitter laugh. The doctors said it was the dementia talking. Pattern recognition gone haywire in a deteriorating brain. I looked down at the carpet. In the afternoon light from the window, the pattern seemed almost to pulse. Definitely an optical illusion. Had to be. $20, she said suddenly. Cash, and I'll help you carry it to your car. It was worth more than that. Even I could tell. The craftsmanship alone, the age. But something in her voice made me not argue. She wanted it gone. Wanted all of this gone. The house, the memories. The reminders of an aunt who saw messages in carpets and died alone with her mysteries. I paid her in the hallway. Helped her wrap the carpet in an old sheet. As we carried it to my car, she kept glancing at it nervously. "One more thing," she said as I closed my trunk. Aunt Patricia kept journals. Dozens of them, all about her. Research. I was going to throw them out, but she hurried back to the house, returned with a cardboard box. "Take them. Maybe they'll help with, I don't know, authentication or something, for insurance." She practically shoved the box into my hands, then retreated to the house without another word. I stood there in the fading afternoon light, trunk full of mystery, arms full of the writings of a woman who might have been mad, or might have been right. My apartment was a converted loft above an old print shop in downtown Burlington. One big room with exposed brick and tall windows that let in too much light in the morning and too much cold at night. But it was mine. My first real place after years of dorm rooms and shared houses. I unrolled the carpet in the center of the room, stepped back to look at it properly. In the different light, the pattern seemed less strange. Just an old rug with an unusual design. The maybe text in the center was probably just pareidolia, that thing where your brain makes patterns out of randomness, like seeing faces in wood grain or messages in clouds. The box of journals sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before Curiosity 1. I'd been grading papers, needed a break from 9th grade essays about summer vacation. Patricia Whitmore's handwriting was precise, old-fashioned, the kind they used to teach in schools, loops and curves that belonged to another era. The first journal was dated 1962. She would have been, what, early 30s? The entries were academic, dry. Notes about carpet weaving techniques in various cultures, historical significance of certain patterns, trade routes that carried designs from Persia to Europe. Normal stuff for someone studying textile history, but as I read further, things shifted. Subtle at first. References to encoded meanings and hidden languages, sketches of patterns with notes like possible phoneme and recurring semantic unit. By 1975, she was convinced that certain carpet weavers had developed a symbolic language, a way to preserve and transmit information through pattern. The human eye sees decoration, one entry read, but the human mind, at levels below conscious thought, recognizes communication. We are pattern-seeking creatures. What if some patterns are seeking us in return? I looked at my carpet. In the lamplight, the central design seemed more prominent. Those almost letters, almost words. I grabbed a notebook, started sketching what I saw. The shapes were consistent, repeating in what might be sequences. If it was a language, there had to be rules. Grammar, syntax. Patricia's journals from the 80s grew more focused and more unsettling. She'd identified what she called active carpets in collections around the world. Rugs that seemed to affect the spaces they occupied. Rooms that felt different with the carpet present. People who reported strange dreams after sleeping near certain patterns. The Whitmore runner is the key, she wrote in 1987. 5 generations of my family have walked that hallway. 5 generations of sensitive minds. The pattern has been teaching us, preparing us. But for what? I went back to my sketch, compared it to some of Patricia's drawings. There were similarities, recurring motifs. She'd developed a partial translation key, symbols she'd identified in multiple carpets. If her system was right, if any of this was real, then the center of my carpet said, no, that couldn't be right. I checked again, drew the symbols larger, clearer, compared them to Patricia's key. Listener found. My hand cramped around the pencil. Coincidence. Had to be. I was reading meaning into meaningless shapes, seeing what I expected to see because I'd been immersed in a dead woman's delusions. But I kept reading. The journals from the 90s were different, more personal. Patricia wrote about dreams, vivid dreams where patterns spoke in voices like wind through wool. She'd started collecting specific carpets, following what she called the narrative thread. Each one was a chapter in a larger story, a story that had been written across centuries, across continents, waiting for someone to piece it together. They're not from here, she wrote in 1998. The patterns, I mean. They're instructions, blueprints, messages from somewhere else, woven into our world fiber by fiber. Hidden in plain sight because who would look for alien communication in a carpet? Alien. The word jumped off the page. This was where she'd lost it, where the research had become delusion. Had to be. But I kept reading. The active carpets change things, subtly. A room's dimensions shift by millimeters. Air pressure fluctuates. Electronic devices malfunction, and sensitive people whose minds naturally process pattern at a deeper level. We hear them, feel them. The carpets are looking for us as much as we're looking for them. I stood up, needed to move. My apartment felt smaller suddenly. The carpet seemed to take up more space than it should, which was ridiculous. It was the same size it had always been. 4 by 6 feet, I'd measured it. Hadn't I? I grabbed my tape measure, 4 feet 2 inches by 6 feet 3 inches. Close enough. Memory playing tricks. Everything was fine. The journal entry for December 15th, 1999 was different. Shaky handwriting, ink blots where the pen had pressed too hard. Finally translated the complete message from the Kerman carpet. Should not have. Should have stopped. They're coming. The patterns are coordinates. The carpets are beacons. And I've activated them. God help me, I've activated them all. The entries stopped for 3 years after that. When they resumed, Patricia's handwriting had changed. Still precise, but somehow wrong. Like someone imitating her style. The treatments are helping. Dr. Morrison says the delusions are fading. I know now that carpets are just carpets. Patterns are just patterns. There are no messages. There is no conspiracy. I was ill. I am better now. But in the margins, in pencil so faint I almost missed it. She'd written something else. They make me say this. The patterns are alive, growing, spreading. Look for the 8-pointed star. Trust the moths. Beware the center. They hear everything we... The sentence cut off mid-word. I looked at my carpet. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw the 8-pointed star woven into the border. So subtle it was almost invisible. But once you saw it, the room definitely felt smaller, and the sweet, wrong smell from the estate sale. It was here now. Faint but unmistakable. Like flowers rotting in secret spaces. I tried to work the next day, tried to focus on lesson plans and grading and normal life. But my eyes kept drifting to the carpet, to the patterns that seemed different each time I looked. Not drastically different, just shifted. Like someone had moved the pieces while I wasn't watching. My students noticed I was distracted. "Miss Chen, you okay?" Bradley asked after I'd stared at the whiteboard for a full minute without writing anything. "You look tired." "I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. I'd slept badly. Dreams full of shifting patterns and voices that weren't quite voices, more like vibrations. Communications at frequencies just outside human hearing. That night, I moved the carpet to the corner, rolled it up, put it behind the couch. Out of sight, out of mind. But I could still feel it. A presence in my apartment. Like having a roommate who never spoke but was always there. I went back to Patricia's journals, the later ones, after her recovery. They were different, careful. But between the lines, in the margins, in the spaces where words should have been, there were clues. She'd never stopped believing, never stopped researching. She'd just gotten better at hiding it. There were references to knitting circles and book clubs that were clearly something else. Gatherings of people who'd encountered active carpets, who'd heard the patterns speak. "The doctors think I'm better," one hidden entry read, and I let them. Easier that way. But the work continues. There are more of us than they know. The patterns have been spreading for centuries. Invasive species of information. Changing our world, thought by thought, room by room. I found a photograph tucked between pages. Patricia, much younger, standing with a group of women in what looked like a library. They were all smiling, but there was something off about their eyes. Too bright, too aware. And in the background, just visible, was a carpet. The pattern was familiar. Not quite the same as mine, but related, like words from the same language. On the back, in pencil, the Burlington Circle, 1978. We who hear the woven word. Burlington, my city. These women had been here, meeting in secret, studying patterns that might be messages, or might be madness. I needed air, grabbed my jacket, headed for the door. But as I passed the corner where I'd hidden the carpet, I stopped. It had unrolled itself. Partially. Just enough for the center pattern to be visible. Carpets don't unroll themselves. But this one had. I should have left, should have run. But instead, I knelt beside it. Studied the symbols I'd translated as listener found. Except now, in the dim light of evening, they looked different, more complex, like there were layers to the pattern I'd missed before. I grabbed Patricia's translation key, worked through the symbols again. Not listener found. Listener found, connection establishing. My hands shook. The room grew colder. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, I could have sworn the pattern moved, not shifted or seemed to move, actually moved. Like something breathing beneath the wool. The phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Miss Chen, this is Dorothy Whitmore. I sold you the carpet last week. I need to speak with you about my aunt's things. About what you found. Please, it's important. There are things I didn't tell you. Things I should have warned you about. Call me back, please." Her voice was different. Scared, but also excited. Like someone who'd been keeping a secret too long and was finally ready to share it. I called her back. "Thank God," she said without preamble. "Is it active, the carpet?" "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You've read her journals. You've seen the patterns. Is it active?" I looked at the carpet. At the symbols that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Maybe. I think so. Yes." A long silence, then, "We need to meet. Not at my house. Somewhere public. There's a coffee shop on Church Street. Cosmic Grind. Can you be there in an hour?" "Why? What's going on?" "My aunt wasn't crazy, Miss Chen. None of them were. The Burlington Circle. They were right about everything. And if that carpet is active, if it's really establishing connection, then we don't have much time. Time for what? To decide if we're going to help them or stop them." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, carpet at my feet, patterns in my peripheral vision. Everything had changed. Or maybe I was just now seeing what had always been there, hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of the world. I grabbed Patricia's journals, the photograph, my sketches of the patterns. If Dorothy had answers, I needed them, because the carpet wasn't just active now, it was humming. So softly I felt it more than heard it. A vibration that went through the floorboards, up my legs, into my bones, like standing near a massive subwoofer playing notes too low for human ears. But I heard them anyway, because I was a listener, and I'd been found. Cosmic grind was exactly what you'd expect from a Burlington coffee shop. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of fair trade espresso and hemp milk. Dorothy was already there, hunched over a cup of tea in the back corner. She looked worse than she had at the estate sale, hollow-eyed, haunted. "You brought them," she said, eyeing the box of journals I'd carried in. "Good, we'll need them." I sat down, ordered a coffee I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. "Start from the beginning. What's really going on?" Dorothy glanced around, leaned closer. My aunt was part of something, the Burlington Circle. Women who studied phenomena, patterns, messages hidden in everyday objects, but especially carpets, rugs, woven things. I saw the photograph. She nodded. They met for decades, collecting information, translating patterns, building a database of communications. My mother was part of it too, that's how I know. She kept it from me for years, tried to protect me. But when Aunt Patricia got sick, when the doctors said it was dementia, Mom finally told me the truth. Which is, the patterns are real. The messages are real. They've been trying to communicate with us for God knows how long. Centuries at least. Maybe longer. Encoding information in designs that human minds can almost but not quite consciously process. Looking for compatible receivers. Listeners. I thought of my dreams. The not-quite voices. The feeling of something vast trying to squeeze itself through the tiny aperture of human perception. What do they want? That's where the circle split. Some thought they were benevolent, trying to share knowledge, uplift us. Others. She paused, sipped her tea with shaking hands. Others thought they were scouts, preparing the way. The patterns aren't just messages, they're programs. Changing reality one room at a time, making our world more compatible with theirs. That's insane. Is it? You felt it, the way space shifts around an active carpet. The way time seems to flow differently. My aunt documented hundreds of cases. Rooms that were bigger on the inside, hallways that led to places they shouldn't. People who walked across a carpet in Maine and ended up in Morocco. I wanted to laugh, to get up and leave, to go back to my normal life of teaching and grading and ordinary problems. But I couldn't, because I had felt it. The wrongness in my apartment, the sense of boundaries becoming fluid. The carpet you sold me. It's different from the others, isn't it? Dorothy nodded grimly. Aunt Patricia called it a node, a central connection point. Most active carpets are receivers, picking up fragments of the signal. But a few are transmitters too, two-way communication. The one in your apartment? It's one of maybe a dozen in the world. And you just sold it to me, without warning? I didn't know. It was wrapped up. Hidden. I thought I'd gotten rid of all the dangerous ones. Burned them. She saw my expression. Yes, burned. 3 carpets that were so active they were changing the physical structure of the house. Mom helped me. We built a bonfire in the backyard, threw them in. They screamed. Carpets don't scream. These did, like feedback through a cosmic amplifier. The neighbors complained about the noise, but they couldn't identify what it was. Just wrongness. sound that hurt to hear. My coffee arrived. I wrapped my hands around the mug, tried to ground myself in its warmth. Real, solid, normal. So, what do? Burn mine too? Maybe. Or... Dorothy pulled out a notebook. Her handwriting was as precise as her aunt's. There's another option. The circle didn't just study the patterns. Some of them learned to respond, to send messages back. You're joking. Think about it. If these things, whatever they are, have been trying to communicate for centuries, and we just now figured out how to hear them, what happens when we answer? I thought about the symbol in my carpet. Listener found, connection establishing. What kind of answer? That's what split the circle. Some wanted to send welcomes, open dialogue. Others wanted to send warnings. Stay away, leave us alone. And a few... She trailed off. A few what? A few had already been changed by exposure to the patterns. Their minds rewired to think in ways that weren't quite human anymore. They wanted to send instructions, how to make more carpets, how to spread the patterns faster, how to prepare our world for arrival. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too normal, like a stage set that might collapse at any moment to reveal the real world beneath. The one where patterns lived and carpets screamed and reality was negotiable. Which group was your aunt in? Dorothy smiled sadly. All of them, at different times. That's why they had her committed eventually. She couldn't decide if the patterns were humanity's salvation or its doom. The uncertainty broke her mind. Or maybe opened it too wide. By the end, she was weaving her own carpets, creating new patterns. We found a loom in the basement after she died, and things on it that hurt to look at. Where is it now? Burned with the others, but the patterns she created, we don't know if copies exist, if she managed to send them out into the world before we stopped her. I thought of my carpet, of the way it had unrolled itself, the humming I'd felt in my bones. I think mine is trying to tell me something, show me something. The symbols keep deepening, like there are layers I'm only starting to see. Dorothy leaned back, studied me. You're handling this better than most. I'm a teacher. I'm used to incomprehensible communications that might destroy the world. The joke felt flat even as I said it. There's one more thing, she said. The circle kept records. Names and addresses of everyone who'd ever owned an active carpet. Tracked what happened to them over time. Want to guess the pattern? I didn't, but she told me anyway. They all reported the same progression. First, awareness of the patterns. Then, understanding. Then, communication. And finally, she paused. Transformation. They became something else. Not quite human anymore. Most disappeared eventually. Just gone. Left their lives behind. Walked into a carpet and never came back. How long does it take? Varies. Some held out for years. Others, weeks. Depends on sensitivity, resistance, how actively you engage with the patterns. She looked at me meaningfully. You've been translating them, studying them, drawing them. That accelerates the process. My hands tightened on the mug. So I'm... what? Infected? Doomed? Maybe. Or maybe you're exactly what they've been looking for. A willing listener who can help complete the connection. Bridge two worlds. She pulled out a card, slid it across the table. This is my number. My real number. When you decide what you want to do, call me. The circle still exists. We can help. Either to sever the connection or strengthen it. Why would anyone choose to strengthen it? She stood, gathered her things. Because maybe they're offering something better than what we have. Maybe the transformation isn't corruption. It's evolution. Maybe the patterns aren't invasive. They're medicinal. healing a sick world one thread at a time. She paused at the door. Or maybe that's just what they want us to think. The pattern talking through me. I can't tell anymore, and she was gone, leaving me alone with cold coffee and impossible choices. I walked home slowly. The Burlington streets felt different now. Every brick pattern in the sidewalk seemed significant. Every geometric design in store windows felt like it might be hiding messages. The whole city was infected with meaning. Or I was going crazy. Hard to tell the difference. My apartment was dark when I arrived, but not empty. The carpet had fully unrolled, spread itself in the center of the room, and the pattern was moving. No doubt now, no optical illusion. The threads themselves were shifting, rearranging, forming new configurations, new words. I didn't need Patricia's translation key anymore. Somehow, I could read them directly, the meaning flowing into my mind without conscious thought. Preparation complete, doorway ready, await instruction. I stood on the threshold of my own apartment, afraid to enter, afraid not to, because I could feel it now, the thinness of the air above the carpet, the way space folded and unfolded in impossible directions. It really was a doorway, a connection between here and somewhere else. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Just coordinates, latitude and longitude. I plugged them into my Maps app, a warehouse on the outskirts of Burlington. Anonymous. Abandoned. Another text. Others have received the call. Come if you wish to understand. Come if you wish to choose. I looked at the carpet, at the patterns that were now writing themselves in real time. Messages from beyond the border of human understanding. Invitations to transformation. I had to choose. Cut the connection and stay human. Or step through and become something else. But first, I had to know what was on the other side. I grabbed my keys, headed for the door. The carpet hummed approval. Or hunger. Or both. The warehouse was waiting. And so were the others. The ones who'd heard the patterns speak. The ones who'd already chosen. I know what you're thinking right now. Did she go? What did she find? What's on the other side of those patterns? But here's the thing about some stories. They don't end. They spread. Like patterns in a carpet. Like messages looking for listeners. So let me ask you something. And be honest in the comments below. Have you ever noticed patterns that seemed too deliberate? Too meaningful? Have you ever felt like the designs around you were trying to tell you something? Because if you have, well, maybe you're a listener too, and maybe they've already found you. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, next time you're walking across a carpet, pay attention to what's beneath your feet. You never know what might be trying to reach up and pull you through. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about the things hiding in plain sight. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens when patterns come alive. And whatever you do, don't look too closely at the carpet in your room tonight. Some doors are meant to stay closed, but some patterns refuse to be ignored. Story number 3. I still remember the taste of that last Snickers bar. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, and something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that made my tongue go numb and my vision blur at the edges. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the vending machine first. The one that changed everything. The one that's probably still out there waiting for its next victim. Actually, before I continue, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at a vending machine? I mean, really looked at it? Not just glanced at the snacks behind the glass, but examined the machine itself. The way the fluorescent lights flicker just slightly. The hum that's almost too low to hear. The reflection in the glass that sometimes shows things that aren't quite there. No? Well, consider yourself lucky. The story begins now. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Seattle does that sometimes. Wraps itself in gray cotton and refuses to let go. I was working late at the Amazon Fulfillment Center, 3rd shift, the kind of job that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. My name's Marcus, by the way. Marcus Chen. 28 years old, student loans up to my eyeballs, and a master's degree in psychology that was about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. It was Tuesday, October 17th, around 2:47 a.m. I know because I checked my phone right before everything went sideways. The break room vending machine had been broken for weeks. Management kept promising to fix it, but promises don't fill empty stomachs during a 10-hour shift. So, when I walked past the loading dock and saw it, a vending machine I'd never noticed before, standing there like it had always belonged, I didn't question it. I should have questioned it. The machine was old. Not vintage cool old, but wrong old. Like it had been sitting in someone's grandmother's basement since the 70s, and had absorbed all the mold and shadows and forgotten dreams. The paint was that particular shade of brown that only existed in the Carter administration. The glass front was slightly warped, making the contents look like they were underwater. But I could see snacks. Real snacks. Snickers, Doritos, those little powdered donuts that taste like childhood and regret. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since... when? Yesterday morning? Time gets weird on night shift. I pulled out my wallet, $3.47 in crumpled bills and sticky quarters. The price display on the machine was broken. Just showed 88 in faded red numbers. But there was a handwritten sign taped below it. Pay what you fear it's worth. Weird marketing gimmick, I thought. Probably some startup's attempt at viral advertising. Seattle was full of that tech bro nonsense. I fed $1 into the slot. The machine didn't just accept it, it seemed to inhale it. The bill disappeared with a sound like someone gasping for air. The buttons beside each snack weren't labeled with letters and numbers like normal. Instead, each one had a tiny symbol, a spider, a closed door, an empty chair, a clock showing midnight. I pressed B4, the Snickers bar. The machine made a sound I'll never forget. Not the normal mechanical whir and thunk. This was organic, like joints popping, like someone cracking their knuckles underwater. The Snickers bar didn't fall, it was pushed out. By what I couldn't see, but for just a second I swear I saw fingers behind it. Too many fingers. I grabbed the candy bar and practically ran back to my station. Told myself I was being stupid, overtired. Too much caffeine, not enough food. The wrapper felt normal enough, crinkly, familiar. I tore it open and took a bite. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, and then I saw it. My worst fear. Not in the candy bar, but suddenly, everywhere around me. The thing I'd been running from since I was 7 years old. The thing that happened in my uncle's pool that summer. The reason I couldn't... No, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me back up. Let me tell you what really happened. What's still happening. The chocolate melted on my tongue, but it tasted wrong. Like pennies. Like blood. And then the warehouse lights started doing something impossible. They were creating shadows that moved independently of their sources. Shadows that had weight. Shadows that whispered. Marcus? I dropped the candy bar. Looked around. The warehouse was empty. It had always been empty at this hour, just me and 5 million packages waiting to make someone's day better or worse. Marcus, we've been waiting. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From inside my skull, from under my tongue, from the spaces between my teeth. I ran. Left my station, left my badge, left my dignity scattered on the concrete floor. Burst through the emergency exit and set off every alarm in the building. Didn't care. The rain hit my face like cold needles, but it was real, it was clean. It was not the thing in the shadows. I made it to my car, a beat-up 2015 Honda Civic with a broken taillight and dreams of being a real vehicle someday. Started the engine with shaking hands. In the rearview mirror I saw the warehouse. All the lights were off. That was impossible. The warehouse never went dark, never. And standing by the loading dock right where I'd found it was the vending machine, still glowing, still humming, still waiting. I drove home doing 90 in a 45 zone, ran 3 red lights, didn't care. The thing about fear, real fear, is that it makes all the normal rules seem pointless. What's a traffic ticket compared to the shadows that shouldn't exist? My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in Capitol Hill that had seen better decades. I took the stairs 3 at a time, fumbled with my keys, slammed the door behind me, turned on every light. The shadows retreated to their proper corners, behaving like shadows should. I was safe. I was home. I was losing my mind. The Snickers wrapper was still in my pocket. I pulled it out with the careful movements of someone handling a live grenade. It looked normal now. Completely normal. Except the ingredients list was wrong. Where it should have said milk chocolate and peanuts, it said other things. Impossible things. Things like childhood terror and suppressed memories, and the sound of water filling your lungs. I threw it in the trash, then thought better of it and fished it out. Evidence. I needed evidence that I wasn't going crazy, that this had really happened. My phone buzzed, a text from my supervisor. "Where are you? Your station's been empty for an hour." An hour? I'd been gone maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most. I looked at the clock on my phone, 4:23 a.m. I couldn't be right. It had been 2:47 when I'd found the machine. I'd eaten the candy bar, seen the shadows, run to my car. 20 minutes, tops. Another text. "Security footage shows you never came in tonight. Are you okay?" My blood turned to ice water. I'd been there. I'd badged in at 6 p.m. like always. I'd sorted packages, taken my first break, found the vending machine. The vending machine. I called in sick. Some lie about food poisoning. Then I did something stupid. Something you should never do when reality starts showing cracks. I went online, started searching. Vending machine plus Seattle plus strange. Vending machine plus worst fear. Vending machine plus impossible. Nothing. Nothing. Then, buried on page 17 of the results, a forum post from 2019. "Anyone else see the brown vending machine? Showed up at my work last week. Ate a Twix and now I can't stop seeing my dad. He's been dead for 10 years. No replies. User deleted. Another post from 2021. "Don't use the vending machine. Don't use the vending machine. It knows things. It shows things. It takes things. I lost 3 days. When I came back, my daughter didn't recognize me. Also, no replies. Also, deleted. I kept searching. Found breadcrumbs, fragments. A Reddit thread that had been removed but still showed in Google's cache. A YouTube video titled, 'The Vending Machine Took My Memories,' with 0 views. Uploaded 3 years ago. The video was just static, but the static had shapes in it. Shapes that looked like... I slammed my laptop shut, took a shower. Tried to wash off the feeling of wrongness that clung to my skin like spider silk. The water was too hot, then too cold, then somehow both at once. I got out, toweled off, looked in the mirror. My reflection was half a second off, like a badly dubbed movie. I moved my hand. My reflection moved its hand. But not quite at the same time, not quite the same way. That's when I understood. The vending machine didn't just show you your worst fear, it fed it to you. Made you digest it, made it part of you. And once it was inside, it grew. I called in sick for the rest of the week. Spent my days researching, my nights trying not to sleep. Because when I slept, I dreamed of the machine. And in my dreams, it wasn't standing by the loading dock. It was in my living room, in my bedroom, in my bathroom, humming its broken tune while I brushed my teeth. By Friday, I'd found the pattern. The brown vending machine appeared at random locations throughout Seattle. Always at night. Always in places where people worked alone. Warehouses, hospitals, office buildings. It would stay for exactly 7 days, then vanish. No security footage ever caught it arriving or leaving. It was just there, until it wasn't. But that wasn't the pattern that scared me. What scared me was what happened to the people who used it. David Kim, night janitor at a Microsoft building in Redmond, used the machine on a Monday. By Friday, his coworkers found him in a supply closet, pressing himself into the corner, claiming the walls were getting smaller. He'd been there for 3 days. The closet was 10 by 12 feet. He insisted it was the size of a coffin. Sarah Martinez, security guard at a Swedish medical center, bought a bag of chips from the machine. Started seeing her daughter everywhere. Her daughter who died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Sarah followed one of these visions into traffic. She survived, but something in her eyes had broken. She kept asking the nurses why her daughter wouldn't stop screaming. Tommy Washington, overnight stalker at a QFC in Ballard, grabbed a Coke from the machine. The next morning, every mirror in his apartment was shattered. He'd done it himself, he said, because his reflection was drowning. Had been drowning all night. He could see the water rising in the glass, could see himself pounding on the other side, mouth open in a silent scream. Each story was different, but the core was the same. The machine knew. It knew what lived in the dark corners of your mind, the fears you'd buried so deep you'd forgotten they existed. And it brought them up, brought them out, brought them home. I mapped the locations, put pins in a digital map, looked for a pattern, a progression, some kind of logic. And then I saw it. The machine was moving in a spiral, a tightening spiral. And at the center was Pike Place Market, the heart of Seattle. The place where thousands of people gathered every day, tourists, locals, children. I had to warn someone, but who? The police? Hello, 911, there's a haunted vending machine on the loose? They'd Baker Act me before I finished the sentence. The media, they'd want proof, evidence. Video of the machine doing its impossible thing. Video. That gave me an idea, a terrible idea. The kind of idea that gets people killed in horror movies. But I was already in a horror movie, wasn't I? Might as well play my part. I went to Best Buy, bought 3 GoPros, a dozen memory cards, and enough batteries to power a small country. The teenager at the checkout counter gave me a look that said he'd seen weirder, but not by much. Making a documentary? He asked. Something like that, I said. I spent Saturday setting up. If the pattern held, the machine would appear somewhere in the International District tonight. 3 warehouses, 2 parking garages, and a 24-hour laundromat. I placed cameras at all of them, motion activated, night vision enabled. If that thing showed up, I'd catch it. Then I waited. 10 p.m. Nothing. Midnight. Nothing. 2 a.m. Nothing. 3 a.m. My phone buzzed. The camera at the laundromat had triggered. I pulled up the feed with trembling fingers. There it was. The brown vending machine, standing between 2 washing machines like it had always been there, like it belonged. The footage was clear. Crystal clear, too clear. I could read the handwritten sign, could see the symbols on the buttons, could see someone approaching it. No, I whispered. Don't, please don't. It was a kid, maybe 19, 20, wearing a UW hoodie and ripped jeans. Laundry basket under one arm. He stopped in front of the machine, tilted his head, reached into his pocket. I was already moving, grabbed my keys, ran for the door. The laundromat was 12 minutes away. 10 if I hit the lights right. 8 if I broke every traffic law in the book. I made it in 6. Burst through the door like a madman. The kid was still there, still standing in front of the machine. A Snickers bar in his hand, unopened. "Don't eat that," I shouted. He spun around, startled, nearly dropped the candy bar. "Dude, what the hell?" The candy bar, put it down, walk away, trust me. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head, which, given what I'd been through, wouldn't have surprised me. "It's just a Snickers, man. Chill." It's not. Look at it. Really look at it. He glanced down at the wrapper. His face changed. Went from annoyed to confused to afraid. What? The ingredients? Yeah, now put it down and back away. He dropped it like it was made of spiders. Backed away slowly. The vending machine hummed louder, angry, cheated. What is that thing? The kid asked. I don't know, but it's dangerous. We need to... The lights went out. All of them. The laundromat plunged into perfect darkness. Not normal darkness, not city darkness with its ambient glow and exit signs. This was darkness with weight. Darkness with teeth. Oh God, the kid whispered. Oh God, I can hear it. So could I, the sound of rushing water, getting closer, rising. My worst fear. The thing that had been chasing me since I was 7. Since that day at my uncle's pool when I'd gone under and stayed under for 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Since I'd seen what waited at the bottom of deep water. What watched with eyes that weren't eyes. Run, I said. We ran, slammed into washing machines, tripped over abandoned laundry baskets, clawed our way toward where we thought the door should be. Behind us, the water rose. Impossible water in an impossible darkness. I could feel it lapping at my ankles. Cold, wrong, full of things that moved. The door wasn't where it should have been, because of course it wasn't. In the machine's darkness, geography meant nothing. We could have been running for miles or inches. Time stretched like taffy. The kid was sobbing. Or maybe that was me. Then, light, sudden, blinding. The laundromat snapped back into focus like a rubber band released. We were standing by the door, hands on the handle. The vending machine sat quietly between the washers. Innocent, patient. The kid's Snickers bar was back in the dispensing slot. Waiting. We ran, again. This time, we made it outside, stood on the sidewalk, gasping, shaking, alive. The kid looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. What was that? He asked. Your worst fear, I said. Or maybe mine, I don't know anymore. The water. You felt it too? He nodded. But that's not my fear. I'm not afraid of water. I'm afraid of... He stopped, went pale. Oh God, the candy bar. It wasn't for me, was it? It was using me to get to you. I felt my blood turn to ice. Again. Getting to be a habit. What do you mean? I mean, I don't even like Snickers. I'm allergic to peanuts. But I had to have it, had to. Like something was pulling me. The machine wasn't just patient, it was smart, it was hunting. And it had figured out how to use people as bait. We need to stop it, I said. The kid laughed, not a happy sound. How do you stop something like that? Good question. Great question. The kind of question that keeps you up at night and makes you check your mirrors for movements that shouldn't be there. But I had an idea. Another terrible idea, because apparently that's all I had left. We don't stop it, I said. We feed it. The kid's name was Jason Ying, computer science major at UW. Smart enough to understand that what we'd experienced broke several laws of physics. Scared enough not to care about the impossibility of it all. We sat in a Denny's on Aurora Avenue, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt hope, and trying to make sense of the senseless. The waitress kept refilling our cups without being asked. Maybe she could see the shell-shocked look in our eyes. Maybe she'd seen it before. This was Seattle, after all. Weird was part of the local flavor. Okay, Jason said, pulling out his laptop. Let's think about this logically. It's a machine. Machines have patterns, rules, limitations. It's not just a machine, I said. It's more. Everything is just a machine when you break it down far enough, even fear, especially fear. He started typing. Fast. Code appeared on his screen like digital poetry. Fear is just pattern recognition gone wrong. Your brain sees a shadow, matches it to predator, floods your system with chemicals. Fight or flight. Basic programming. This thing knows my worst fear. My specific, personal, because it's reading you. Somehow. Biometrics maybe. Micro-expressions. Hell, maybe it's scanning your brainwaves. The technology exists. DARPA's been working on... DARPA doesn't make vending machines that break reality. He stopped typing. Looked at me. You sure about that? I wasn't sure about anything anymore. Look, he continued, you said it moves in a pattern. Spiral, heading for Pike Place. Why? Maximum victims, I guessed. Biggest crowd? Or biggest feast? He turned his laptop toward me. I've been tracking social media, keywords, variations of vending machine and fear and Seattle. Look at the timestamp spread. Data flowed across the screen. Tweets, Instagram posts, TikToks, all mentioning encounters with the machine, all deleted within hours of posting. But Jason had caught them, cached them. The timeline was damning. It's accelerating, I said. Feeding more frequently, and look at this. He pulled up a map. Not just of Seattle, of the whole Pacific Northwest, pins everywhere, Portland, Spokane, Vancouver. It's not just one machine. My stomach dropped. How many? Based on the data, at least 12, maybe more, all moving in patterns, all converging. On Seattle. On Pike Place, tomorrow night, October 31st. Halloween, of course. The night when the wall between normal and nightmare was thinnest. When people expected fear, courted it, wrapped it in fun-sized candy bars and called it entertainment. We have to warn people, I said. Warn them about what? Magic vending machines. They'll think it's a publicity stunt. Viral marketing for some horror movie. He was right. In the age of social media, the extraordinary became ordinary. The impossible became content. People would line up to use a haunted vending machine, post selfies with it, live stream their worst fears for likes and subscribes. Then we stopped them ourselves, I said. How? That was the question, wasn't it? How do you stop something that exists outside the normal rules? That feeds on fear like a vampire feeds on blood? You said everything is a machine, I said slowly. Machines can be hacked. Jason's eyes lit up. You want to hack fear itself? I want to hack the machine, make it malfunction, feed it something that breaks its programming. Like what? I thought about my encounter. The water rising. The darkness with weight. The fear that had chased me for 21 years. What if we fed it a fear that doesn't exist? Explain. The machine reads us, knows our fears. But what if we gave it something to read that wasn't real? A manufactured fear, something so specific, so impossible, that trying to manifest it would cause a paradox. Jason was typing again. Faster now, excited. Like a logic bomb, a fear of something that can't exist. The machine tries to create it, can't, crashes. Exactly. But how do we manufacture a fear? Fear is involuntary. You can't just decide to be afraid of something. He was right, but what if we don't have to? What if we just have to make the machine think we're afraid? More typing. His screen filled with biomedical data. Heart rate patterns. Galvanic skin response. Pupil dilation. All the physical markers of fear. We could simulate it. Create a device that mimics the biometric signature of fear. But we'd need to know exactly how the machine reads us. I know someone who might help, I said, remembering the forum posts, the deleted videos, the breadcrumb trail of victims. But first, we need to find someone who's used the machine and survived. Really survived, not just physically. Any ideas? I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my screenshots of deleted posts. Found the one I was looking for. Tommy Washington, the mirror guy. He posted again, 3 weeks after his encounter. The post was short. It's still with me, but I'm learning to live with it. If you've seen the machine, if you've used it, you're not alone. Meet me at the Space Needle, Tuesdays, midnight. Look for the man who carries his own reflection. That's tonight, Jason said. Then we better hurry. We paid for our coffee with crumpled bills that smelled like fear sweat. Drove through Seattle streets that seemed darker than usual. Every shadow could hide a vending machine. Every reflection could be watching. The Space Needle at midnight was supposed to be closed, but Tommy was there, standing in the observation deck's shadow. He looked wrong, like someone had traced a person from memory and gotten the proportions slightly off. His shadow fell in 2 directions. "You used the machine," he said, not a question. "Yeah," I said. "The water? Still rising?" He smiled sadly. "It never stops, but you learn to swim even when you're drowning." He looked at Jason. "You?" "Almost. This guy saved me." "Lucky. Most don't get saved, most don't want to be." Tommy pulled out a flask, took a sip, offered it to us. "Helps with the reflections. Makes them blurry. Easier to ignore what's wrong with them." I took a sip. Whiskey. But it tasted like chlorine, like pool water. I passed it to Jason, who politely declined. "We want to stop the machines," I said. Tommy laughed, actually laughed. "Stop them? You can't stop them. They're not really here, not really anywhere. They're just doors, windows, places where the fear leaks through." "From where?" "From wherever fears live when we're not feeling them. The place that sends the nightmares. The place that knows exactly what will break you." Another sip. "But you can't break what's already broken." "What do you mean?" He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. One pupil was larger than the other. "I mean, the machines aren't the problem. We are. They only work because we're afraid, because we carry our fears like luggage, dragging them everywhere. The machines just open the bags. So, if we weren't afraid, then they'd be just vending machines, broken ones, selling expired candy to no one." He stood, swayed slightly. His shadow steadied him. "But good luck not being afraid. Fear's what keeps us alive, what makes us human. Take that away, and what's left?" "Someone who can stop the machines," Jason said quietly. Tommy looked at him, through him, past him to something only he could see. Maybe. Or someone who becomes one. He started walking away, then stopped. "If you're really going to try, there's something you should know. The machines don't just feed on fear, they store it. Every person who's used one, their fear is still in there, growing, multiplying. And tomorrow night..." "What?" I asked. "What happens tomorrow night?" "Harvest season," he said. And then he was gone, walking into shadows that swallowed him like water. Jason and I stood there, processing. The Space Needle loomed above us, a giant needle ready to puncture the sky, or maybe to inject something. Something that had been building up, fermenting, waiting for the right moment to flood the system. "We need that device," Jason said. "The fear simulator, and we need it fast." "I know someone," I said, thinking of my useless psychology degree. My professors who'd studied fear like some people studied wine. "But she's not going to like this. Does anyone like any of this?" Fair point. We had less than 24 hours. One day to create a fake fear, hack a supernatural vending machine, and save Seattle from its own nightmares. No pressure, no problem. No way this could go horribly wrong. But as we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that Tommy was right. The machines weren't the real problem. We were, our fears, our inability to let go of what scared us. We carried our demons like comfort objects, feeding them with our attention, growing them with our avoidance. The vending machines just gave them bodies. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, had been my abnormal psychology professor at UW. She'd spent 30 years studying fear, mapping it, categorizing it. She'd written papers with titles like The Taxonomy of Terror and Evolutionary Advantages of Anxiety Disorders. If anyone could help us manufacture a fear, it was her. She lived in a Victorian house in Wallingford that looked like it had escaped from a Gothic novel. All turrets and gingerbread trim and windows that watched you approach. I'd been there once before, for an end-of-semester party where we'd discussed phobias over wine and cheese. This visit was less festive. Marcus, She answered the door in a silk robe and an expression of profound annoyance. "It's 3 a.m. I know, I'm sorry, but this is important. Unless someone is dying, someone might be. Lots of someones. Tomorrow night." She studied my face, saw something there that made her step aside. "Come in, both of you." Jason and I entered, grateful. Her house smelled like old books and bergamot tea. Comfortable, safe, normal. Everything the world outside wasn't anymore. We told her everything. The vending machines, the fears made manifest, the pattern, the convergence. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through skepticism, interest, and finally, a kind of grim acceptance. "Show me the footage," she said. I pulled up the GoPro recording on my phone, the vending machine materializing, the kid approaching, the darkness that followed. She watched it 3 times, zooming in on details, pausing at specific moments. "Fascinating," she finally said. "Absolutely fascinating." "That's one word for it," Jason muttered. "You don't understand." She stood, began pacing. "I've theorized about something like this for years, a physical manifestation of the fear response, a way to externalize and examine our deepest anxieties. But I never imagined that someone would weaponize it, I suggested, that it would weaponize itself." She moved to a bookshelf, pulled down a leather journal. "Fear isn't just an emotion. It's an energy, a force. Every time we feel afraid, we generate something. Call it psychic residue, emotional radiation. It has to go somewhere. And the machines collect it," Jason said. "More than collect, they cultivate it, refine it, like a distillery for terror." She flipped through pages covered in equations and diagrams. "If your pattern is correct, if they're all converging tomorrow night—" "Harvest season," I quoted Tommy. "But harvest for what?" She looked at us with eyes that had seen too many theories become reality. "For birth. Something is using our fears to gestate, to grow, and when it's collected enough, when it's fed enough, it emerges," Jason finished. We sat with that for a moment. The idea that our fears, our personal terrors, were being used as building blocks for something larger. Something that would step into our world wearing a skin made of nightmares. "So, how do we stop it?" I asked. "Your idea about a false fear is sound in theory," Dr. Chen said. "But it would need to be precise, specific, something that registers as fear to the machine but creates a paradox when manifested." "Like what?" She smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. "Like the fear of not being afraid." Jason's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard. "That's brilliant. A recursive loop. The machine tries to create something that makes you afraid of not being afraid. But the moment you feel that fear, you're no longer not afraid, so the fear disappears. But then you're not afraid again, so the fear returns." "Exactly. An infinite feedback loop. It would be like dividing by 0. The system would crash." "But how do we make ourselves feel that?" I asked. "How do you fear the absence of fear?" Dr. Chen moved to another bookshelf, pulled out a small device that looked like a fitness tracker had mated with a lie detector. "Biofeedback manipulation. I developed this for treating phobia patients. It can induce the physical symptoms of any emotional state, including fear." "You can fake fear?" Jason asked, impressed. "I can fake the body's fear response. Elevated heart rate, increased cortisol, pupil dilation. Whether that's enough to fool your machines?" "Only one way to find out," I said. We spent the next 6 hours preparing. Jason coded. Dr. Chen calibrated. I tried not to think about what we were about to do. The sun rose like a bloodshot eye, bringing October 31st with it. Halloween, the day when monsters were supposed to be fake. By noon, we were ready. The device looked innocuous. A simple wristband with a small display. But when activated, it would flood my system with the biological markers of terror. false terror, impossible terror, the fear of not being afraid. "Remember," Dr. Chen said, "the moment you put this on and activate it near the machine, you'll feel everything. Your body won't know the fear is fake. You'll experience genuine terror." "Of what?" I asked. "Of whatever your mind fills in the blanks with. The fear needs a shape, even if that shape is nothing. That doesn't make sense. Neither do vending machines that serve nightmares. We're past sense now." She was right. We'd left sense behind the moment I'd bitten into that Snickers bar and tasted my childhood trauma. Jason had triangulated the convergence point. Pike Place Market, just as we'd predicted. But specifically the lower levels, the part tourists rarely saw, the maze of shops and corridors that existed beneath the main market, the place where the city stored its shadows. We arrived at 4 p.m. The market was packed with Halloween celebrations, kids in costumes, adults pretending they weren't scared of getting older, street performers painted like gargoyles and ghosts, normal Seattle weird, the kind that made you smile instead of scream. But below was different. The fluorescent lights flickered with intent. The air tasted like rust and anticipation. And in a corridor that hadn't existed yesterday, 12 vending machines stood in a perfect circle. All of them brown. All of them humming. All of them waiting. "Jesus," Jason whispered. I counted the machines. Did the math. If each one had been collecting fears for weeks, if each fear was growing, multiplying. "How many people do you think use them?" I asked. Based on the social media data, hundreds, maybe thousands. Thousands of fears, all stored, all ready to be born into something worse. The machine's displays all showed the same thing. 0 o'clock. A countdown that hadn't started yet. Or maybe one that had already ended. "We should wait," Jason said. "Come back when they're active. When we know." The machines turned on, all at once, all together. Their displays blazed to life. 11:59, and counting down. "So much for waiting," I said. The humming intensified, harmonized. Became something that was almost music, almost words, almost screaming. I strapped on the device, my hand shook only a little. "If this doesn't work, it'll work," Jason said. But he stepped back, away from the machines. Away from what was about to happen. I approached the circle. Each step felt like walking through increasingly thick air, like the atmosphere was becoming solid. The machines watched me with their glass faces. Inside each one, I could see movement. Not snacks, not candy, things that writhed and pressed against the glass. Things that wanted out. I stopped at the nearest machine. The handwritten sign was different now. "Pay what you feared you're worth." Past tense. Like it already knew, like it had always known. I activated the device. The fear hit me like a physical force. Not water this time, not drowning. This was worse. This was the fear of feeling nothing. The terror of being empty, the horror of being unafraid in a world that required fear to navigate safely. My heart hammered. Sweat poured down my face. Every muscle tensed for flight. But there was nowhere to run from nothing. No escape from absence. I was afraid of not being afraid, and that fear made me afraid. Which meant I wasn't not afraid, which meant I fed $1 into the machine. The bill disappeared with a sound like reality tearing. The machine's hum became a roar. The buttons lit up, each symbol writhing, changing, becoming something else. Something worse. Something impossible. I pressed B4, always B4. The Snickers that had started everything. The machine screamed. Or maybe that was me. Or maybe that was the sound of paradox trying to resolve itself. The candy bar didn't fall, didn't emerge. Instead, the glass cracked. Spider-webbed. Behind it, something that had been growing fat on human fear convulsed. "It's working," Jason shouted. "The loop is—" The other machines responded. Their displays went haywire, numbers that didn't exist, symbols that hurt to perceive. The circle of machines began to vibrate, shake, blur at the edges, and then they gave birth. Not one thing, not 12 things, but somehow both. A creature of absence, a thing made of the space between heartbeats. It pulled itself from the machines like taffy, stretching impossibly, a hole in the world, shaped like everyone's worst moment. I saw my uncle's pool, but also operating tables and car accidents and empty cribs and final diagnoses and every fear that had been fed to the machines over weeks or months or maybe years. All of it. All at once. All hungry. The paradox device on my wrist was smoking. Overloading. The fear of not being afraid was trying to compute itself against a thing that was all fears and no fear simultaneously. "Run!" Jason screamed. But I couldn't, because the thing looked at me with eyes made of not eyes and spoke with a voice made of not voice. "You're the one who understands, the one who tasted truth. You can't unfear what you've already swallowed." It was right. The Snickers bar, the first taste. It was still in me, had always been in me, growing. "Marcus!" Jason was pulling at my arm. "We have to go." "No," I said. "I have to finish this." I walked into the circle of machines, into the thing that was unfolding like a nightmare origami. It didn't attack, didn't need to. I was already infected, already part of it. Had been since that first bite. But that also meant I was connected to it. Could feel its hunger, its purpose, its need to spread, to grow, to turn the world into a place where fear was the only currency and terror the only truth. And connected to it, I could feel its weakness. It was afraid too, afraid of being starved. Afraid of a world that didn't fear it, afraid of irrelevance. I laughed, actually laughed, because it was funny, wasn't it? The ultimate fear was fearing it wasn't feared enough. "You're just another machine," I said. "Another broken vending machine selling expired product." It recoiled. The machine sparked, smoked, began to melt. The thing of absence began to collapse, folding in on itself like a quantum nightmare. "But you're in me," it said with its not voice. "You'll always be drowning. Always be 7 years old at the bottom of the pool. Always be—" "Yeah," I said. But now I know why. I thought about Dr. Chen's words, about Tommy's reflection, about Jason's code. Fear was pattern recognition, but patterns could be rewritten, reprogrammed, hacked. I closed my eyes, felt the water rising. But this time, I didn't fight it, didn't panic. I let it fill me, let it become me. And in becoming it, I changed it. The water wasn't water. It was just memory, just neurons firing in learned sequences, just a machine running broken code. I opened my eyes. The thing of absence was gone. The machines were puddles of melted plastic and impossible circuitry. The lower market was just a lower market. Halloween decorations and confused vendors and the smell of fish and coffee. Jason stood at the entrance to the corridor, eyes wide. "Is it over?" I checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. November 1st. The harvest had passed. The birth had been aborted. The fear had eaten itself. "Yeah," I said, "it's over." But that was a lie, because I could still taste it, still feel it moving under my tongue, the thing the machine had put in me, the fear that wasn't just fear anymore. I walked out of Pike Place Market into the Seattle night. Jason followed, asking questions I couldn't answer. The city looked normal, felt normal, but I could see the places where more machines would appear, could feel the fear building again, collecting, waiting, because the thing about fear is it's patient, it's resourceful, and it's already inside us, growing, waiting for the next harvest. I went home, threw away the device, deleted the footage, tried to forget. But every time I pass a vending machine now, I check. Is it brown? Is it humming? Is it waiting? And sometimes, late at night when I'm half asleep and my defenses are down, I swear I can hear it. The sound of something dispensing. The thunk of a candy bar falling. The whisper of a wrapper that says things it shouldn't. Because the machines aren't really gone. They're just waiting, evolving, learning from their mistakes. They'll be back, different, smarter, hungrier, and when they come back, they won't just know our fears. They'll know our names. So, that's my story. That's what happened in Seattle last Halloween. Most people don't believe it, call it an urban legend, a creepypasta, a viral marketing campaign that got out of hand. But you believe it, don't you? You've seen them. The vending machines that shouldn't be there, that hum wrong, that sell things that aren't quite right. Maybe you've even used one. Felt that first taste of something impossible, something that's now growing inside you, patient as fear itself. If you have, if you're out there reading this, feeling that familiar crawl of recognition, know that you're not alone. We're all infected now, all carrying our own little piece of the harvest. But here's the thing they don't want you to know. The real secret, the truth that even the machines don't understand. Fear only has the power we give it, and we can take that power back, one breath at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. The vending machines will return, the harvest will come again. But maybe, just maybe, this time we'll be ready. This time, we won't be afraid of our fear. We'll be afraid of the right things. Like what happens when fear realizes we don't need it anymore. Sweet dreams, Seattle. And remember, check your candy bars. Check your reflections. Check the shadows that fall just a little too dark. Because somewhere out there, a vending machine is waiting, humming its broken song, offering its impossible prices, waiting for you to pay what you fear you're worth. But don't worry, it's probably nothing, probably just a story, probably just your imagination running wild on this cozy October night. Probably. The question is, are you brave enough to find out? Are you brave enough to take that first bite? Or are you already tasting something that shouldn't be there? Something moving under your tongue? Something that tastes like chocolate and peanuts and caramel and whatever you're most afraid of? Tell me in the comments below. Share this story if it kept you up. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what's really happening in the shadows of Seattle. Because I've got more stories, more machines, more harvests, and trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. This is just the beginning. The vending machines were just the first wave. Wait until you hear about the elevator that only goes down. But that's a story for another night, another dream, another fear. Until then, sleep tight, and whatever you do, don't use the machine. Now, sleep. Or at least try to. It's quiet now, too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot behind the curtain every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't, because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, The instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you, and comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can.